So, Eric, you there?
Yes. Can you hear me all right?
We can. Can you hear me now?
Excellent. Yes, I can hear you guys. Hey, Jen and Matt, I'm an agnostic atheist. I have theistic challenge questions. I have a million, so cut me off whenever, and I'll call back another week.
Okay,
the first
goodbye.
one on the call screener. Oh,
Sorry.
Yep, classic. Okay, so Eric Hovind said that all branches of science were founded by religious people. So what do you guys have to say about that? And why does Hovind probably think that's compelling? Checkmate, atheist.
Yeah, so let's assume for a second that it's completely true, that all branches of science were founded by religious people. So what? You're talking about a world that was almost entirely full of religious people. Who else would have been doing it? But the question is, was it their religious beliefs that directed them to begin these branches of science? In some cases, perhaps. In some cases, not. But science isn't tied to or contingent upon any religious belief or any religious person. It is a methodological system which, when it stopped being natural philosophy and began to be science, set aside any appeals to the supernatural, making all religious claims irrelevant to the proper workings of science. And it's not that these people's religions gave us truths and understandings about the world. The fact that religious people basically invented disciplines of science or began disciplines of science that were then reformed, it's the process that went through. You might as well be saying all hospitals were started by religious people. Well, that doesn't tell you anything at all about what religion has to say about medicine. All charities were started by religious people, which is a lie. And we have more and more secular charities. But the fact that somebody is religious and doing something that is true and good doesn't tell you anything at all about whether or not their religion is true and good.
Well, and I would add too, back when a lot of branches of science were first kind of coming into being, think about for a minute, who had access to books and reading, and how would you go about recording this stuff? And mostly it was, at the time, churches controlled a lot of the educational opportunities that people got. And so if you wanted to study something, oftentimes you ended up, if not in a monastery as a monk, certainly you spent some time there. So it's not, an unusual thing that, that was sort of the repository of knowledge for a lot of communities.
Religious groups have created a lot of hospitals, a lot of universities, and back in darker times, that's where the literate people were. So okay. And by the way, I don't think that his claim is true. I'm pretty much convinced that we could fairly quickly come up with some scientific disciplines that were founded or fine-tuned in their starting states by people who weren't religious. And what we also might find is that some of these people who were religious, who started scientific disciplines, were doing so in opposition to the teachings of their religion. Yes, they were convinced that God had created the world and wouldn't lie to them, and that there should be some natural order in the world that they could then go and discover how God did it. You get back to mathematics as a language with which God has written the universe. But you might also just be talking about vague deistic and theistic notions and working in direct opposition to what the church had to say, which is how Galileo ends up in prison.
Yeah.
Good enough?
Pretty cool. Yeah, could it be like a cum hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy? Like with this, therefore, because of this.
Well,
they were religious.
It's not that fallacy, because simply saying all branches of science were founded by religious people isn't an argument, it's just a statement. I don't know what conclusion he reaches from that and how he reaches it. So there's not a fallacy to identify. It just is either true or it's not true.
Mm-hmm. Very cool, very cool. I apologize. May I ask a second theistic challenge question, or should I call back next week?
You can have one more theistic challenge question quickly.
All right, I'll ask the best one. You guys are pro-gay marriage, so aren't you guys the bullies and bigots shoving your values onto Christian cake makers and others and your evolution values? And why are atheists and liberals trying to oppress Christians who just want to live by their values and make their businesses do the same? And also, white men are the most oppressed group in America.
Okay. So how would you respond to that parade of poop?
Yeah, so the rules are if you're open to the public, you have to serve the public. So if you don't want to make cakes for gay people, then what you do is instead of having a business that's open to the public, you form a private club, and then people can join your private club and you can only sell cakes to them. But, I mean...
The main answer, I think, to most of these is something that we actually read when we were going through the position statements, that the ACA opposes legislation to seek discrimination against individuals on the basis of these things. We believe that laws and regulations which limit or deny freedoms and rights must have a valid secular foundation. If your religion tells you that you need to be able to hit people over the head with a stick, and I take your stick away and prevent you from hurting people, I'm not imposing upon your religious freedoms, because your religious freedoms end where they begin to interfere with the rights and freedoms of others. So this is the sort of crybaby, I'm the majority who's being persecuted by the minority, when what's really happening is we are making sure that you don't get a privileged position where you are then allowed to legislate your personal religious convictions onto other people who don't share them. That's it.
Very cool, very cool. Thanks, guys. I'll call again some other time. The show is like a Rocky montage for your brain, so keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.